The Midnight Children, Chapter 5, in which a ghost is met and a lie is spoken. The window across the street was empty in the morning, but Ravini knew what he'd seen. They were over there. She was over there. Who were they? Where had they come from? Why were they hiding? It's not just that they were something mysterious. It was more that they were something different. And something different was something Ravini wanted very much. Because if something was different, there was always the hope that it would be something better. Downstairs, his mother was at the kitchen table sipping coffee. She was wearing her painting smock, hair pulled back in a sloppy ponytail. "Painting day?" Ravini asked her. "Indeed," she smiled at him. "I'm just waiting for inspiration and a subject." Ravini's mind sparked. He thought about the house across the street. "How about cattails?" he asked. Moments later, he was out the door, wiping toast crumbs off his lips. He had a folding knife in his pocket. He walked slow through the crowded yard, whistling conspicuously. Craned his neck to squint into the windows he passed. There was no answering whistle, no face looking back at him from a window. On the other side of the creek, in the deeper backwater where he'd caught the frog the night before, the cattails stretched up out of the water, tall and slender. Off with his shoes, with his pants leg, out with the blade, and into the water he went. He shivered when the water rose above his knees, but soon he was among the thrushes, seeking out the fattest ones and cutting them from their stems. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. One more, and there it was, a step away, and the biggest yet, fatter than a sausage. A frog sat on a lily pad next to it, blinking doubtfully at Ravini. "It's all right," Ravini said to the frog. "I'm not after you today." He stepped forward and was reaching toward the cattail when a voice spoke out behind him. "Careful with that knife." Ravini jumped, dropping the knife into the water and his knees with a plop. He spun around, and there she was, the girl with the silver hair. He'd been right, too, the first night. Her hair was a golden in the sunlight, though it was still pulled back with a black ribbon like it had been in the moonlight. She was barefoot, wearing holey-kneed old jeans rolled up to her knees and a dingy white t-shirt just like before. Ravini opened his mouth, but no words came out. The girl looked at him with solemn eyes. "Thank you for the frog, I mean, and the fireflies." She had a strange, flat way of talking. Her voice didn't go up or down all that much. It wasn't a voice that reached out and hugged you. It held you at arm's length and maybe even frowned a little. Ravini knew "you're welcome" was in order, but still his voice was stuck, somewhere between his heart and his throat. He'd half believed that the children in the moonlight hadn't been real and they'd been nothing more than a dream, but now here she stood in front of him. So Ravini, wordless, just nodded. The girl raised one of her eyebrows, then she walked toward him, a slow splashing stroll right into the water and across the creek. "Don't you talk?" she asked. Before he could answer, she went on, "It's okay if you don't. Most people don't say anything worth hearing anyway." Her face was serious, thoughtful, and her voice was low with a scratch at the bottom of it. It sounded like how a campfire smells. Her eyes were greenish blue, but so pale that they were nearly gray. The corners of her mouth tucked down and her eyes narrowed. "But I heard you talking to that frog, so you can talk." "What, you just don't talk to people then?" She leaned forward, looking deep into his eyes, and her next words she spoke in a whisper. "You can talk to us, though, if you want, 'cause we're not real people. We're ghosts." The hair on Ravini's arm stood up, and not because of the cold water swirling around his bare legs. The girl with the golden hair was crazy. Ravini could see the sunlight on her cheeks and the breeze flickering at her hair and the way the water rippled around her legs. She was as real as he was. Ravini cleared his throat. "I could talk," he said. "Oh." The girl took a step back. She looked almost disappointed. That'll make this easier, I guess. What's your name? Ravini licked his lips. He'd been teased all his life by Donnie and many others, a lot of different times for a lot of different reasons. One of the most common, though, was his name. My name's Ravini, he said with a sigh, waiting for the laugh and the scoff that would come next. But people called me Rav. The girl didn't snort or roll her eyes, though. Ravini? I haven't heard that one before, was all she said, but she didn't say it mean. She just said it true. Ravini. I like it. Ravini's heart skipped a little when she said that. He nearly smiled. He actually liked his name, too. Where'd she get a name like that? My mother gave it to me, which was true. Why? Ravini's mind raced. Well, it's a family name. I'm named after my grandpa. The girl tilted her head to the side, her lips pressed together. Liar, she said. Somehow she managed to say the word not mean at all. She said it plain, like it was just a fact, which in this case it was. Tell me the truth. There was no way in the wide, woeful world that Ravini Foster wanted to tell that strange Solem girl the truth about his name. And yet, there was simply something about her stillness and her eyes and the way her voice was scratchy and soft at the same time, like old corduroy. It's a kind of dessert in Greece, I guess, he said. And she's always wanted to go to Greece. When I was born, she said, he stopped, realizing he had gone too far. What was he thinking? It was too late, though. The girl blinked. What did she say? Ravini gulped. He dropped his eyes to the water. She said I was the sweetest thing she ever saw, so she named me after the dessert. He flinched, waiting for the laugh or the taunt. Again, though, it didn't come. Instead, the girl reached forward and grabbed his hand. She lifted it up towards her face. Ravini gaped at her like a caught fish, and then that girl licked the back of his hand. Bullspit, she said flatly. You're not sweet at all. You're salty. Your mother should have named you Pickle. Ravini grinned and started breathing again. Or French fry, he said, and for the first time the girl smiled. Or nearly did. Perhaps it was small and it didn't last long. It flickered like a goldfinch through the trees, but it was there. She let go of his hand. I saw you all, he said, that night with the truck. But the girl interrupted him. And are those for us too? She said, looking at the cattails in his hand. No, they're for my mother. She's going to paint them. The girl nodded. They'd make a nice picture, I think. Just then, a sound rang from the direction of the house behind her. It was a sound Ravini had heard before, like the hoot of an owl. The girl frowned. I have to go, she said softly, looking deep and serious into his eyes. Wait, Ravini said, as she took a step back, but then a voice barked at them. It was hidden by the trees between, but it coursed with authority. Her father's voice, Ravini was sure. Virginia, get in here, now! Ravini's heart raced, but the girl just rolled her eyes. Is that your name? Ravini asked. Virginia? Sure, she said, and then bent down and slid her hand into the water. When she stood back up, she handed Ravini his dropped knife, dripping with creek water. Thanks, he said. Virginia, the voice shouted again. You better stay here for a minute where he can't see you, she said, still looking gravely into Ravini's eyes. I'm not supposed to talk to you yet. Ravini's brow furrowed. Who? He said. Why can't you? But Virginia held a finger to her lips, just like she had the first night. She shook her head slowly from side to side. Not yet, she whispered. Then she turned and walked away back across the stream. When she got to the other side and the sound of her splashing was over, Ravini suddenly remembered something. Hey, he hissed in a hoarse whisper, as loud as he dared. Happy birthday! She looked back at him over her shoulder. For a moment, it looked like she was going to smile. Instead, she frowned. I'm not looking for a friend, she said. Ravini smiled, his skin stung cold. Me neither, he lied. Her eyebrows went up and her mouth opened just a bit. She stood there for a breath looking at him. "Goodbye, Ravini," she said, and then turned and walked away, leaving him with a damp hand and somehow more questions than he'd started with. Okay, come back for chapter 6.